Good morning, Jelka. Thank you so much for making time to talk to me about how Dubrovnik has dealt with over-tourism. I was there a while ago, and clearly you had a very big problem. But I think what you've done in managing it as a city is extraordinary in international terms. I'd say you're amongst the top 3, 4, or 5 in the world for how you've addressed it. So what I wanted to hear from you today, if you're willing to share, is your experience of how the issue emerged, the way the city responded to it, and maybe a little as well about the future. So if we could start, Jelka, when did the problem of over-tourism really arise in Dubrovnik?
Well, it happened, let's say 2015, 2016, but we as a local government were elected in 2017. And just after the election, after we took the responsibility for governing the city, we were faced with big titles all over global media saying Dubrovnik is the city to avoid in 2018 and the city which is suffering a lot from over-tourism. Then we actually immediately realized that we need to do something and immediately act, not wait for some, I don't know, a scientific or strategic solution or strategic documents, etc. So we started with some very simple, small activities, which gave us the opportunity to better control the crowds at that moment and to put, for example, the rope on the entrance of the city and enable people to go in different directions to avoid crowdness on the entrances, which was actually one of the worst images ever of Dubrovnik going around the world, especially today in time of when social media is present everywhere and to everyone. So with those small activities, cutting the number of rental spaces for stands and booking stands, etc., also for some souvenir sales, we managed to do immediately kind of a small difference. The way we would like, we wanted to show to our stakeholders, to our residents at the first place, that we want to deal with the problem. So we started with small activities. Later on, we contacted, that summer actually, we contacted CLIA, which is a major association of cruise companies, and we started to be partners with them in a way that we put together some rules and regulations regarding cruise ship calls. As I told you, with the support and partnership of CLIA and cruise companies, but also of the port authorities of Dubrovnik, which is responsible for the port. And then we started to better control the cruise ship calls. So it was like some of the first steps we did, but later on we developed the project. We started with it to develop it and to make even a strategic platform, which is called Respect the City. And in the center of that an umbrella project is our resident, but also the visitor, because we would like, and still it's our main goal, to provide better quality of life for our residents, at the same time the good quality of visit or experience in the destination for all our visitors. And so far we are doing good. We of course each year are developing new activities, new models, new programs. But thank you for saying that we are recognized globally, because we really are, especially in that context of cruise ship calls management, since we were one of the first, actually the first ever destination to deal with the way we dealt with, to contact cruise company and to become became partners with them in order to have to achieve a common goal. And the common goal is to have stakeholders happy, visitors happy, residents happy, and the destination safe and preserved for generations to come.
Jelka, thanks for that. Can I just come back to you on a few of the things to get a bit more of an understanding to help the people who are going to watch the video? I mean, the first question I had was, did over-tourism feature as an issue in the election campaign?
Yes.
It did, in the same
Yes,
way that
it
it did
did.
in Barcelona.
It did, but not in a way that we were concentrating only on that. It was a part of our campaign because we were aware that the situation has to change, that the management of the destination should be improved. But the moment when we faced that global titles and global media qualification of Dubrovnik as a city which is dying, actually maybe was an extra push for us to act immediately.
So one of the things it seems to me happens when over-tourism happens anywhere is a sense that the residents of the city, and probably the people who live in the hinterland of the city and use it regularly, begin to feel that they've lost something which was very important to them.
Of course, we didn't have any kind of public demonstrations or rude behaviors towards tourists. Never, because Dubrovnik economy is based on tourism, so people are actually involved in tourism directly or non-directly, but everybody is living out of tourism. But still within the old city of Dubrovnik, which is UNESCO heritage site since 1979, and 2024 this year is declared to be the UNESCO heritage year in Dubrovnik. So we are having different activities around that moment. For them, the situation was really difficult to cope with. Crowds, constant pressures, narrow streets, traffic jams, even in pedestrian zones. That was something which we realized it's not sustainable anymore. That we need to, as I told you, we need to make change, but the change is not an instant moment. The change needs to be a process.
It's always a process.
Yeah.
But you originally, as I understood the way you were describing the processes you've been through, you began with what you described as smaller steps. I would say they were quite big steps, but let's not argue about that. But essentially, you were using regulations and authority that the city had,
yes,
probably through planning and street management and street sweeping and all of those things. Initially,
definitely.
that was the first set of things.
That was the first step. Yes, we did what we were able to do regarding our authorizations.
Yeah, so you were fortunate, I think, in Dubrovnik that as a country, Croatia gives quite a lot of different powers to local authorities. That there were pieces of legislation applied nationally that you could apply in Dubrovnik to deal with the issue.
Yes, for example, our tourism tax, it's a national law, of course, but it's in a way decentralized because you, as a destination or the region, throughout your local parliament assembly, throughout your assembly, you are supposed to give decide the amount of money which tourist has to pay. That's the kind of decentralized. Also, the city of Dubrovnik initiated the involvement of the cruise tax, which is also decentralized, and each and every port destination has the opportunity to decide whether to use it or not to use it. I must say that all ports in Croatia are applying it, river ports and seaports as well. And we were the destination actually who initiated that, because what we did with the cruise tax, which is paid per capacity per vessel, it's used per call, of course. It's used in our overall budget. It goes directly to the city budget, but it's used for dealing with infrastructure. So we are using that money to invest in infrastructure, which is basically used by city buses or tourist buses who are taking back and forth cruise passengers. So that's something we are very happy with, and we also communicated with cruise companies 2 years in advance, and they were really well aware of the new obligation they will have to fulfill to call Dubrovnik.
Just before we come back, Jelka, to talk more about the cruise, because I think that's a big international problem and people will be interested in how you dealt with that. There are a couple of specific things I wanted to ask you about other aspects.
Yeah.
We'll come back to cruise.
Okay.
The issue of quite understandably, restaurants, when they're very busy, grow their businesses in part by expanding onto the pavements and then into the road. And when I visited Dubrovnik many years ago, it was already very obviously a problem. Now, I think you changed the regulations around what could be put onto the pavements and in the roads.
We cut for 20% the first year when we arrived by the decision of the city assembly. We cut the rental space for the restaurants within the old city of Dubrovnik. And also we have strong controls, because if you have some measures, you need to have a control of the measure as well.
Sure.
So it's now in a, let's say, decent level. Of course, you would be more happy if all the streets are free of tables and chairs, but
Sure.
that's not, it's not realistic. You cannot deal with some unrealistic wishes. You have to deal with what the life is actually. And but we are happy with how we manage that, because it was contracted with the restaurateurs for 5 years, meaning that 25 next year all their contracts regarding rental outside spaces and those public spaces is going to be changed. So we actually put together the contract with them for 5 years, just to be sure for them and for us that they can invest and they can be free of thoughts that they might lose what they were planning to have. And the city government is stable in income for that year, let's say. What we need to do now, it's in those future contracts, we will try to put some new moments, such as having their restaurants open throughout the winter time, because we are now developing the winter offer. We will have more flights for the next year. The COVID period gave us actually a headache, because we lost a lot of airline and
Sure.
connections, flying connections during winter time. But what we are trying now to put together is a kind of obligation for the restaurateurs to agree upon how they will be open throughout the winter time, because we don't want tourists to come during winter time and not to have even a decent restaurant to have a meal.
So, Jelka, just to sum that up for the benefit of people who are listening, the reality was that when you took power in Dubrovnik, you were able to use the existing national legislative structures around the licensing and leasing of properties and to control the use of the pavements and streets through existing powers.
Legislative level in Croatia enables local authorities to govern on their own area of responsibility, let's say. Not in every sense. For example, what's one of the biggest issue we still are not happy with, it's the law on traffic security, which actually gave us a big headache regarding taxis and those taxi services like Uber, Bolt, etc. When we had a tremendously high increase of taxi vehicles in Dubrovnik, but also we initiated one change in that law based on the fact that Dubrovnik is UNESCO heritage site. So for the year 24, starting 1st of April, we will have a zone of limited traffic that will be the zone of UNESCO protection, in which only with special licenses vehicles will be able to enter, let's say. That, of course, excludes residents because they are
No, of course.
exclusively living in Dubrovnik, and they will have all they need. And throughout this new program, they will also be more, I believe, happier, let's say,
Sure.
that way. Yeah.
So we've talked about how you've managed to manage the restaurants and the bars. We've talked about the transport. What about accommodation? To what extent have you been able to manage the impact of Airbnb and similar platforms?
To be clear, Croatia has a good system of private accommodation regarding legislative moment, because in general, all owners who are willing to have their properties rented, uh, they can get the license in a very easy way, and they have some benefits in paying taxes, etc. So it's functioning quite good, and we can also, as a Croatia, can be a kind of role model for that, because it's less Airbnbs or other facilities to rent which are not registered officially within our regional offices. But what happened, and that's actually the corner in which we cannot influence on because of the national legislation, is that in the new constructions, for example, new buildings who were supposed to mainly serve as residence zone, nowadays we have a lot of apartments for rent, which are legally licensed. It's not problem with that, but we don't have the mean to stop it.
Yeah.
Only like general urbanistic plans, etc. That's something we can have as a platform for controlling that boom. But at the moment, the general urbanistic plan is in the process of a change because of different issues we had, and as you probably know, it's a very long administrative process. And once it's finished, then we'll have a new tool, let's say, for managing the destination, and also the new law on tourism, which was approved by the Croatian National Parliament in December, enables local authorities and local tourist boards to have more control over the tourism offer in general, and especially that part of private accommodation facilities. Although it's very, how to say, it's very sensitive matter, because the tourism is main economy in Dubrovnik. All our residents are at the same time private owners renting their private apartments or rooms or villas or whatever, but it's something which needs to be stopped in a good way, because that happens. The consequences are young families not have possibility to provide themselves accommodation or a home. Young people are trying to find a home, even to rent a home, which gets impossible because of the tourism. So it's a situation which is globally recognized, but also that's the part we still are not happy with.
So just to sum that up, Jelka, to make sure that people have understood, my understanding from what you said is that the national legislative framework provides you with the necessary powers to license and regulate accommodation, but it
Yes, but
doesn't.
that's not, sorry, I have to interrupt. It's a regional level
The regional
of
government,
giving
yeah.
licenses. The
But the
city level
legislation,
cannot affect on that.
yeah, but the legislation doesn't allow you to prevent accommodation
No,
being.
no,
So that's quite a big difference between the two
yes,
things. You can
yeah,
regulate what exists, but you can't control the numbers.
yes,
Yeah. And
yeah,
I mean, that's just a classic example, if I might say this, Jelka, for the benefit of others who are watching. It's a classic problem for all local authorities,
yeah,
that they're dependent upon the legislative framework that exists at
yes,
the regional or national level. And that's often a frustration for people
It
running
is,
cities that they
yes,
don't have the necessary powers.
yeah.
But I
On
wanted,
one hand,
if I,
we used all the possibilities we were able
of
to do.
course,
On the other hand, we still have that very big issue which we cannot. Uh, I
absolutely, and
mean,
I
we
can
are
only
trying to
sympathise.
deal with it, and our mayor communicated just lately about how we would like to cut the number of private accommodation facilities in Dubrovnik. But it's then, if you don't have a legislative platform, then it all stops with the constitutional law and
Yeah.
freedom of the person, etc., etc., etc.
It's perhaps worth adding, Jelka, for the benefit of people who are watching this, that for a city to deal with over tourism and to manage it, it's not something that the tourist office can do on its own. You have to work
No,
with the planners, with
yeah,
the street cleaners, and
yes,
all the different elements of local government have to work together
yes.
to effectively achieve the
Yes.
management.
Unfortunately, tourism office, I believe, not only in Croatia but in other countries as well, are not legally enabled to perform some activities they would like to do. I know the situation in Croatia, but I believe it's the same way in
It's the
other
same
states.
everywhere, Jelka.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
it is
with
a.
this law on tourism, which the state of Croatia now has, maybe the situation will change, but always throughout the very close cooperation with the local authorities.
I think one of the ways that I I've come to realise this is that essentially a tourist is a temporary resident. And Dubrovnik has two kinds of people. You have temporary residents who are
Yes,
tourists, and you have
and
the day visitors who come off
yes,
the cruise boats, and we'll come to them. But the temporary residents are just like other residents. So it's the housing authority, it's the planners, it's the refuge parts of the local authority. And I think tourism too often, we saw this a lot in South Africa when I worked there, the tourism people feel so marginalized, not in your case, but often they feel very marginalized in the city government structure, that they're not really able to get other departments of the city to work with them. Now, I don't think that was the case in Croatia. I
yeah,
think the new
yeah,
administration came in and the city government came together to deal with the
yes,
problem. But that's a big political problem at the beginning of the process.
yeah. It is, but in Croatia, according to the law, again, the mayor of Dubrovnik or the mayor of other city is at the same time the president of the assembly of the tourism board. So it's a very strong connection throughout the figure of the mayor, but it's not only the figure, it's actually behind the figure needs to be political will
Yeah.
to act and also the good communication among all stakeholders and working together with on all levels of course gives the result, and we can confirm that because I believe that throughout our activities and what we achieved, we are quite a decent example of that type of communication and working together gives results.
I think you're far more than just a decent example. I think you're a very good example. That's why I
Thank
wanted
you.
to interview you. Let's come then to cruise, because that I think people were really surprised by how much you were able to achieve in reducing the number of boats each day, number of ships, and the way in which you were able to work with the cruise lines to achieve that.
Yes.
Do you want to just talk us through how that process happened?
Yeah. It's a simple process. You have to be very persistent and you have to work towards your goal. Our goal was to have better organization of cruise calls. We have still a strong support of the port authorities, which is managing the port of Dubrovnik, because it's a national institution and they don't have a profit as a main goal, let's say. They are profitable, of course, but at the same time, they would like to have the destination happy with the cruise traffic in the port. The cruise companies were in that time really aware of the bad image cruise industry is, let's say, still having. Maybe it's better now, the situation improved. But what we found out is that the cruise industry actually is very much aware of the need of sustainability, of the, I don't know, all kinds of modern ways of using electric powers, shore power, etc., LNGs, etc. They are investing a lot of money in adjusting their vessels and dealing with that green European deals and what all demands are towards them. And what we also were and still are aware, of course, is that image and perception are a big part of why residents were not happy with the cruise industry the way it was. Because when you see 6 or 7 big cruise ships, then if you maybe don't feel the pressure, then your perception says it's not normal. And then we provided, together with port authorities, the berthing policy, which is a document sent 2 years in advance to each and every cruise company who wants to call Dubrovnik, with strict rules. For example, we started with one set of rules, then we develop it. Nowadays we have a rule. It's always the same rule, that there are only 4,000 people in one part of the day in Dubrovnik, 8,000 in total. It's basically two cruise ships per day, per one part of the day, or one big cruise ships, because you know that cruise ships are getting bigger and bigger. But we don't want. Actually, the port of Dubrovnik is not so big, so we cannot expect to have biggest vessels visiting Dubrovnik. But for example, when we have a ship with 4,000 passengers, then we have only that ship all day in the port. And the minimum stay is 8 hours in the port, which does not include the period from midnight to 6 a.m. So it was actually a combination of rules which enables us to better control the traffic flows, but also the flows of pedestrians and visitors in the old zone. And after that period, a few years, we did a measurement with the University of Dubrovnik and the analysis of visitors' flows. And then we realized actually that we were really successful, because we don't have peak days, not so many peak days as we used to have before. We have better flows throughout the week, throughout the month, and even on a yearly basis, we can feel that the season shoulders are getting stronger, and it's not all concentrated in your July and August or June, let's say.
So I know that your berthing policies is available online, and I'll put a link next to this.
I'm not quite sure, because it's the matter of the port authorities. I'm not quite sure they are having that online, but all the cruise companies are having it. And if you need it, I will send you the link of the port authorities. Maybe you can find it there, or I'll find it for you and send it.
No, I've just found it online. It's actually there. I was surprised. I thought it would be a
Yes,
private document.
you found it.
But
Sorry,
I
I
just
didn't.
looked and it's there. So I will
Yes,
put a
dear.
link
Yeah.
with this, Jelka, because I think that'd be really useful to people who are experiencing difficulties with cruise lines. But the thing that I think people were so surprised by was not the aspiration of Dubrovnik to do this, but the fact that you were able to do it. So if you contrast your situation with, say, Barcelona and Venice, there too, the ports are owned by national government.
Yeah.
But national government has been reluctant to support the cities in moving the port further away from the cities, or restricting the number of boats that can berth at any particular time. But that was not a problem. Well, it was not a big problem for you, obviously, because you managed to achieve it. But was it difficult to get the Port Authority to change its policies in this way?
No, in Dubrovnik, no, because it's a national institution, and Dubrovnik, the city of Dubrovnik, has also the member in the management, in the board of the port authorities, and they were also very much aware of the situation, which was not good, because affected the over tourism affects all stakeholders, and then if you have that situation and very bad image, then what else you can expect than your destination to suffer a lot from that image. And that's something which was recognized immediately, and we were really enabled to negotiate with them and to find the best solution. Of course, the port authorities are those who are uh, responsible for all the cruise traffic, let's say, but they are always consulting us as authorities about different making schedules, making changes in birthing policy, etc. And the communication beside all of that is very important, because why we started with the cruise industry, because very transparent. You can find itineraries for cruises 2 years in advance, and then if you act towards them the same way, you give them information 2 years, communicate a new thing or a new text or a new moment 2 years in advance, then you can be sure that it will go very smoothly, and it will be accepted. And we all know that nowadays they say sustainability is a market demand. And I told you that cruise companies and CLIA as association is very much aware of the importance of them as one of the biggest stakeholder in world tourism in general. That responsibility is huge, and I'm sure that they are aware of that. And we are really thankful and grateful to them. They recognize Dubrovnik as a partner.
Yes, I wasn't sure I'd ever hear a city thank the cruise lines in that way, but I can see why it makes sense for you. And I think the success of what you've done in Dubrovnik will give a lot of hope to many other destinations who are struggling with, which are struggling with the problem of how to manage the cruise arrivals,
Yeah,
because it is an increasing problem around the world.
yes.
Jelka, is there anything you want to add that we've not talked about and that you think we should have covered in this
Yeah,
brief?
maybe I just want to stress that the nation had its power, and it's something which I believe is from time to time forgotten. So the destination, it's strong, and if you have a political will, which is also very important, and if you are persistent in achieving your goals, the sustainability is a long process, but it's not impossible to achieve.
Yoko, I agree completely with that, and thanks for making the point. I find it now whenever I talk with people from government that the way I approach it is to say you've got a real choice. You can either be used by tourism or you can use tourism. You can
Yes,
use tourism to make a better place
yes,
for your residents to
yes,
live in, or you can be used by it. It's your choice. And I think
yes.
you're absolutely right. We need to encourage cities, national parks, regional governments to take responsibility and begin to manage the tourism to make
Yeah,
sure they
and
benefit from it.
yes, and tourists are happy with it also,
Yes.
because if you show your strength, and if you give rules and regulations, you will be more respected, actually. That's what we experienced.
Yoko, I'm not sure I should say this at the end of the interview, but when I visited, whenever it was, I think it was 8, 9 years ago, I put Dubrovnik on the I don't want to come back list.
Okay.
If I might say so, it's now come way off that list because I know the success you've had in managing it, and I think many people are aware of that. You know, Dubrovnik is suddenly a really exciting place to go because you have managed tourism and you have made it sustainable for the benefit of the community, but also to give a better experience for the tourist.
Yes, and for those people who really want to experience the city, we are working very hard on having the season all year round, and
Yeah.
we are very much concentrated on that. So my recommendation for you would be next winter is the time for your visit.
Thank you very much, Jelka. If I do come, I shall look you up. But thank you
Of
for giving
course.
us your time so generously and for being so open about the processes you use to get control of tourism in Dubrovnik. So thank you very
Thank
much
you.
indeed.
Thank you for your invitation.